Hey cats, it's Ed Shoehorn Bud here. Today with a shock initial review of the Nike Zoom Alphafly Next Percent 2. Doesn't have the typical new running shoe smell. I think that's because it isn't really a new shoe. Thanks for joining me on the channel, cats. It's always appreciated. Help the channel out to continue to grow by hitting that subscribe button and also clicking the bell below for notifications of when I fire out those new morsels for you. Also, give this video a thumbs up like and share it with your running buddies. An initial review of this one today. Literally got it in hands over the weekend. Thought I'd missed out, but managed to pick one up, thankfully, I think. In my UK size 11, which is a US size 12, this one weighs in a little bit more than the original version of the Alphafly. It's about 12 grams heavier, in fact, than the Alphafly version 1. We're talking about 278 grams here, which is about 9.8 ounces. It's certainly a wider shoe underfoot too. I think there's about 3mm of extra width in the mid to forefoot, and there's a couple of mil extra in the heel too, so you can expect a more stable ride. Now, I'm measuring a colossal stack height here in the heel of 46mm, believe it or not. So if somebody out there can explain how this all works, I don't know. Does it have to just conform to 40mm for the sample size and then, you know, it just doesn't matter in the higher sizes? Let me know. I've no reason to lie about this. That's what I've measured, and I've measured it in a way that works for all other shoes, and I get very reasonable measurements. So it makes for about a 6mm drop, something along those lines. Nike is saying it's an 8mm drop, but it doesn't really feel all that different to me than the original version of the shoe. Lengthwise, bang on 29cm, making it true to size really for typical Nike sizing. Let's go into the review. We'll start with the upper first. So just to state, this isn't a shoe that I've been sent by Nike. I've bought it with my own Earth credits, and it kind of hurts a little bit. Upperwise, this one's got more in common with the Nike ZoomX Streakfly than anything else, although there are some knit sections that do remind me of the Infinity Run Flyknit. The toe box area here has a much more rigid sort of coarse feel to it when you compare it up against the knit that we had in the first version of the shoe. That was almost floppy. This kind of stands exactly where it needs to be. There's quite a bit more reinforcement around the front toe box area as well, which might improve durability a little bit down the line. There's a lot more thickness here in the tongue over the original version of the Alphafly. It's almost like one of your grand's jumpers or something. Very flexible sort of knit here over the top of the foot. Now, there's a really weird lace reinforcement here. I'm going to try and show you on the camera. These sort of thick plastic pieces here that the laces run through. It almost looks like some sort of packaging material, you know, stuff that they wrap around items on pallets to keep them all together. This gets more and more like a load of packing material every single time. The ankle padding here is actually quite addictive to squash. It's like one of those kids' toys you get at a fair, some sort of strange foam in there. I don't know what it is. I've been doing this for hours. Soft as a squirrel after a light wash in the bird bath. Oh, look at that one. It's an absolute whopper of a pull tab there. Look at that Gert pull tab there. And you need them as well. It's a really difficult shoe to get on. It does start to give a little bit once you've got it on 3 or 4 times, but I would suggest you carry an array of shoe horns with you if you're going to wear these at a race. Not sure where you're going to put the shoe horn after you've got the shoe on, but you can worry about that later. The laces, though barely needed, are of the perforated variety, and they stay fastened up on my initial run without any issues whatsoever. Dare I say it, more comfortable over the top of the foot due to that padding. I'd suggest it's probably about the same in terms of toe box depth as the version 1, and I found a little less lace pressure was required to get a really good lockdown. I found it breathable enough on today's relatively warm run, though I did find the upper gave a little bit over the first few miles and I had to stop to relace one of the shoes. I would suggest that you get a couple of longer runs in if you're going to utilize these for a race. Don't use them straight out the box. I wouldn't really suggest that for any shoe anyway. Always get some runs in before if you're going to use it for a peak race. I don't score shoes on looks ever, but I think this one looks really, really nice. I really love the mixture of the whites and the greys and the off-whites with a little splash of orange here and there. With those difficulties getting the shoe on, I'd suggest it's not one for the triathletes out there. I'm going to give it a 2.8 out of 3 for the upper after my initial runs.
Midsole now.
Now, midsole wise, anybody that suggests that the arch is less present in this version of the shoe against the first one is wrong. They haven't really considered the increased size of the insole that Nike have included in the Alphafly Next Percent 2. All it does is just cover up where the arch is. It's still there, it's still just as present, and if you had an issue with it in the first version, you'll certainly have it with the second. Now, the increased size of the midsole here is another point I want to talk about. It kind of cups around the foot a little bit. Kind of reminds me of like a cup sole shoe like the Jordan 1 or something. You can feel it kind of around the front of the toe box, and it creeps up a little bit around the back in the heel too. So it's that age-old Nike trick of making it look like you're getting a lot more midsole here than you actually are. I think maybe there's a little bit more than the V1, but it's not really that much. It's negligible. Now, the easy to catch on anything heel flare is sort of gone. Well, it's kind of still here. I mean, some people are going to suggest it's for aerodynamics or something, but is it really needed? Who's ever going to engage the very end section of the midsole there? It's just not going to happen, is it? Just seems bonkers to me, in fairness, and it's just a point of failure that's just waiting to be caught on something. Now, Nike have put a touch more foam under the air pods here, and that has made the shoe a little bit quieter than the first version. If any of you have run in the Alphafly Next Percent or perhaps the Tempo Next Percent, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like someone attaching some suction cups to an anvil and then repeatedly slamming it against the floor. The foam doesn't creep out and spill out as much either sides of those AirPods this time round. I often thought it was a little bit like a set of bellows really with those AirPods in the mid to forefoot here. It appears as though Nike have tried to get a little bit more foam around the midfoot area and also around the AirPods to try and protect them perhaps. Though this is going to make it a lot more difficult to try and get any debris that gets caught up inside here. Your pipe cleaners aren't going to fit in there anymore, guys. I got to say, the finish of the actual midsole foam here in my pair of the shoes is pretty shoddy. There's little bits kind of hanging off where they were clearly from a mould of some sort, and there's glue marks aplenty everywhere. It's pretty shoddy for a 275 Earth credit shoe. Expect like a premium sort of shoe for that. I'd certainly suggest that Adidas's quality control is way above Nike's right now. Asics are kind of on another level as well, above Adidas. When I opened up the box with the Metaspeed Sky Plus, it was like, wow, that looks like a great shoe. It's really well finished. This thing looks like Beast put it together on a Friday afternoon. How does it perform though? On my initial runs, I tested out some miles at half marathon and marathon pace. So for me, half marathon pace is about 6 minutes, 50 seconds per mile. And it felt great, I have to say. Really smooth, very stable, and the ride was a little bit more assured when going around corners and on some bends. Certainly on my initial runs, my thoughts were that Nike have repositioned this shoe as the half marathon to marathon shoe. If you want max cushion and you want to get through that marathon come hell or high water, then the Alphafly Next Percent 2 is going to be the one. Is it going to be the shoe that people pick for a 5k to half marathon? Probably not. I think they're trying to provide some differentiation between the Vaporfly Next Percent 2 and this one. There's 40 grams difference between the Vaporfly Next Percent 2 in my size and the Alphafly Next Percent 2. I mean, this level of cushion is still going to be overkill for many runners. I'm quite a slight gentleman, and do I need this level of cushion? Maybe for a marathon, but not for a half marathon. Not a chance. As such, I think the versatility of the midsole's kind of nerfed a little bit. If you're going to use it for training all the time, you know, general stuff during the week, you're probably going to get a lot of miles out of it, but I think it's overkill really, especially in those larger sizes. I'm going to give it a 2.7 out of 3 for the midsole after my initial runs. I think the cushion in the Prime X is superior to what we've got here in the Alphafly Next Percent 2. There, I said it. I think that shoe generally is more cushioned, but then it should be. There's another 6 or 7 millimeters of stack there. At 5 or 10k pace, I just think it's too much shoe now. Outsole now. The outsole setup is greatly changed here on the Alphafly Next Percent 2, and I anticipate it being a more durable shoe, perhaps one that you can use on a more daily basis. I think the thicker rubber in the heel section of the shoe and the redesigned mid to forefoot section are going to provide some great traction and grip. The very direction and pattern of the lugs is where it's at. The forefoot area is now a mass of lugs, both protruding and inverted, which should provide some great grip. Overall, we've got more rubber underfoot, more coverage across the whole of the outsole. That's going to please a lot of people. I think a lot of you wore out your Alphaflys back here in the heel. I think a lot of people will be very happy to see there's a bit more foam under the midfoot rather than rubber, though we've still ended up with a slightly more weighty shoe. I never really had a problem with the outsole grip on the Alphafly. Here in the Alphafly Next Percent 2, I think we've got some reliable grip. Felt very assured today on various different terrains. I think you could even use it on some lighter trail settings. You could get away with it on grass too. The original version of the Alphafly wasn't the best on that, so an improved outsole update, I think, and that can't be said about all super shoes. Just remember where Kipchoge has no doubt tested these shoes out over the last few months: compacted dirt roads. That's something we don't really have very much of around here in Yeovil, Somerset. I say with these shoes, use them and enjoy them. Don't keep them in the box, hidden away. They're not to be babied or pampered. Use them for their intended purpose. Grip at higher speeds was great, and considering the rubber has been minimised, there's no compromise on traction. Impressive. Most impressive so far on the outsole account. I'm going to give it a 2.9 out of 3 for the outsole after my initial runs. Value now. Can't get away from it, guys. One punishingly expensive shoe. As I was taking it out the box, I was thinking, do I really want to run in this shoe? What happens if it falls to bits? Will I cry? Well, it didn't fall to bits, and I don't think it will. I see no reason why you won't hammer through several hundred miles in this shoe, as long as you get nice and lucky with the AirPods and they don't get punctured somehow. It's a wild price, 275 Earth credits. You cannot escape it. I've lost track of how many viewers recently have picked up the Alphafly Next Percent original for a discounted price. There's so many, it's just unreal. With the changes here making the shoe heavier and wider, it's now one for the half to full marathon runners. I see that versatility just sort of decreased a little bit. There's a much more niche use case for this shoe now. It simply isn't going to be as versatile as the Vaporfly Next Percent 2. That is still the king of the super shoes. For me, this is like an Air Jordan now. Nike are doing what they did with the Air Jordan brand. You know, you got those classics, haven't you? The 1s, the 3s, the 4s, 5s and 6, the 11s and 12s. This shoe is aimed at mass market sales, where perhaps the Alphafly was a very niche kind of shoe. I think they're aiming this at people who are doing a marathon regardless of the pace that they're running at. Now, that's going to upset people. They'll say, oh Ed, what are you talking about? It's a load of old cobblers. There's a very small band of runners that are running a lot of these races and setting records. They're winning, they're coming in the top 3 or whatever. All of the other people, what about them? Everything that Nike are putting out in terms of the Alphafly Next Percent 2 is all about how this shoe can work for anybody. Perhaps people might be buying this shoe because they've got 2 goal marathons in a year. Can't see people picking it up if they're just running the odd 5 or 10k. I think the Alphafly Next Percent 2 will be durable enough though, taking into account the miles I got out of the original version. It looked sort of untouched really after 100 miles. I've seen people put in like 500-600 miles into their pairs. There's a whole massive cushion to be utilised here for some longer runs, and it might keep you fit and healthy and get you through your marathon training block too. Yeah, it's a big price and I don't think it's for everybody. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 3 for value. It certainly is a fantastic shoe if you're going to be running those marathon and half marathon paces. For everything below that, I think there are a load of models out there that are by far cheaper and are going to be a much better deal in terms of value. If I've added all the scores up correctly, that gives us a 10.8 out of 12 after my initial runs for the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next Percent 2. Have you picked the shoe up? What do you make of it so far? I did see a couple of reviews that said it was the greatest shoe that they'd ever worn. I'm just really disappointed in the smell. It's just neutral almost. Very depressing. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one down in the comments. A musical interlude for you. Today, courtesy of Nick Drake's Brighter Later. This is a wonderful album. I can remember the first time I heard it, I was captured by the beautiful sound, so mellow, so jazzy. Really does remind you of the summer, pretty much all of the tracks. Almost like when the sun's going down. You can just imagine this album kind of playing as you're walking around a quiet city. There's some lovely instrumental pieces on this album which complement Nick's Fantastic acoustic playing. A lot of people's highlight here is Northern Sky, but I really like the track Fly as well. At the Chime of the City Clock's probably my favourite though. You can almost imagine somebody in some sort of hotel looking out of the window watching all the hustle and bustle of the city. I think at the time Nick Drake was living in the city, and it's very much his city album. You can hear those vibes all over the tracks. Released in 1970, today's album is Nick Drake's Brighter Later. Thank you for tuning in. It's always appreciated. If you haven't done so already, help the channel out by hitting that subscribe button. Also click the bell below for notifications so you can be notified about stuff. Give this video a thumbs up like and also share it with your running buddies. Hit us up with a super thanks if you want to ask me a specific question about the shoe review today. My name's Eddbud and I'll be seeing you